Welcome, welcome. We get started here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay. Let me see here. All right. Can everybody see this, hear me okay and see the screen, I hope? Always the scary part of the webinar. So maybe if you just raise your hand, I'm able to see that, hopefully. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Wait about another minute. We'll get started. All right. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So I'm Brian Klontz, President and founder of Charitable Solutions. Going to be an interesting, I hope, conversation today around strategic and practical ways that community foundations and really all other charities as well can say no and to do so with love and hopefully better fit for both the community foundation and more importantly for the donor's impact, intent, goals, etc. So little housekeeping notes. We do not send out the slides specifically, although we do indirectly through a free recording. I think this is our 55th, I can't remember, webinar that we've done, but all of them are on the library on the website and also in a YouTube library, all for free. And we'll also, I think there should be the Q&A, I think, should be enabled on your Zoom dashboard there. And so any questions you have, I may not be able to get to them during the session today. But I am collecting the ones from Tuesday, the ones from today. We'll answer all those questions, and then we'll include that as an attachment with the free recording that will go out early next week. So that's it. So we will sort of just jump right into it. So very briefly today, I'll spend maybe like 3 or 4 minutes, not as much as usual, but talking about sort of the odd things that we do as a firm. And so I left actually the Community Foundation to start this firm in 2003 with the sole mission of helping make charitable gifts happen that otherwise wouldn't, primarily through risk management and structure. We do 6 primary things. So top right there, we do emergency assistance, administration, audits, disaster relief, and personal hardship funds. You can see we currently manage through a charity I created in 2010, the Emergency Assistance Foundation. I think it's up to about 450 companies now. And about 14 million employees, so it's a pretty large operation, but do that around as outsourced for companies or community foundations that don't want to be in the disaster relief emergency fund space. Bottom right, these types of webinars, training, speeches for all those different sort of constituencies, primarily for CE for advisors. Bottom middle there, charitable appraisals. If you can give it to charity, we can appraise it. And so I've been doing a massive amount of crypto appraisals until April 15th, and it thankfully has slowed down a little bit. I also do life insurance appraisals. We have 2 people on staff that do business appraisals. Just had 2 referrals yesterday for our precious metals person, one for jewelry and one for art, all this week, strangely. But if, again, as a outright gift during life or for life income gift or estate gift, we only do them for charitable appraisals. The 2 primary areas we work in are charitable gift annuities and non-cash assets. So for gift annuities, they're sort of top middle. We have actuary on staff since day one of the firm, and I work with this area as well, doing CGA risk management audits for existing pools and or for very large gift annuities within those pools or new prospective gift annuities on how to manage that risk. And then for those that don't wish to be in the gift annuity business at all and or don't want to do it in a particular state and or don't want to do one gift annuity and having the donor split it up among multiple charities or potentially a gift annuity being funded with some kind of complex gift, we have the National Gift Annuity Foundation. So calling out now, we are over 1,000 gift annuity contracts, growing about 25 to 30% per year. And that actually represents about 350 charities that have made direct referrals. Most importantly, we're in all 50 states, and 100% of the residuum is granted back to the charity or charities that the donor was trying to give it to in the first place. And finally, non-cash asset risk management. So we have multiple structures, both a national corporate DAF, Decami Foundation, and national DAF in trust form, Decami Asset Trust. We've roughly averaged about $1 billion a year in these donations, all of which were initially declined by the referring charities, primarily private business interests, then real estate, a lot of crypto last year, not as much this year. But most importantly, again, we don't manage anything once it is sold, and then the donor advised fund agreement is then having a standing grant recommendation for that those final proceeds typically go out 30 days after we receive settlement funds. So we're really just a giant non-cash donor advised fund pass-through organization. So that's it on us. So let's sort of jump into the hopefully the more fun part, and that is what we're going to cover here. So I've worked with, I had the pleasure of working with about 350 community foundations over the last 20 years. I do a lot of this through Extramally Clients, strategic planning consulting firm. And in doing so, in many cases, what I learned very early on, and I knew working with a community foundation, is that we are, as staff and board, sort of genetically predisposed to say yes. So very difficult to say no. And so work with a lot about sort of saying, if this isn't a good fit, what do you do? And many understandably struggle with that. So this will be sort of the 5 ways of saying no. It's what I call strategically and tactically, sort of the how-to, and then more importantly, the 8 ways of saying no in specific situations. So the practical side that I'll go sort of one by one through those, at least that many, not all, many community foundations are not interested in particular types of activities or funds or assets. And I've got on the bottom here a little quote, so kind of everybody's grandmother, so just because you can doesn't mean you should. So I have a series that may or may not be insightful, I'm not sure, of Klontz quotes, which we'll cover here. So that's your grandmother quote. So here's some of my Klontz quotes are, kind of do these one by one. And these are from prior scarring, to be sure. So one is community foundations are entirely blessed in that you can do almost anything, and entirely cursed in that you can do almost anything. And that creates the challenges. And so we're going to go through some specifics of what that means, but I think any of you working for a community foundation quickly understand, and I hope that resonates sort of as a quote. And sort of an extension of that is no phrase fits better for a community foundation than death by opportunity. So you are never, ever, ever lacking an opportunity, but you can drown in that opportunity as well. And or the currents, if you will, of that opportunity can be taking you in a completely different direction than what your community needs you to be, perhaps what other donors need you to be, and what your community foundation's mission is. And so that's a whole other issue, is if you're on your heels, you're in trouble, because the noisiest person or the squeakiest wheel will take you off-road pretty fast. I've been there. Every 100%, every community foundation board would unanimously agree that you can't be all things to all people. So we could just do an insta vote right then. And then you say, but who are we not going to do something for? And then all hell breaks loose. So that becomes a problem. It's like Congress all over again. So this becomes friction, right? So how do we balance sort of being the community's foundation and working with donors of all sort of stripes on the one hand, but also understanding that, yeah, but we can't do all things for all people, even though legally you kind of can to a great extent, which gets back to the first quote of that being a curse. I also use this metaphor a lot. A community foundation is like a 10 by 10 room with an 8 by 8 rug. You're never going to cover everything. You just aren't. And the foundations, I think, that do the best job with this is sort of understanding what corners or what areas of the rug of our community, obviously extending the metaphor, do we want to cover? Can we cover? Are we good at covering? Is sustainable, maximizing the impact? And which ones that we all intentionally and deliberately choose not to cover. And if you're not covering something, then you're having to say no. And that's obviously the point of this talk today. The other thing is, I tell my daughters this all the time, B's get degrees, don't go nuts. So B's get degrees, and many cases an A plus customized solution for the donor. Can you do this thing? Can you do that thing with a whole lot of specificity? In many cases, and I would say, I put in here, usually is an F solution for the charity. So if you allow the donor sort of full, let's whiteboard this thing, that usually does not end well. Or you're gonna have to go, no, 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 nip, nip, nip. That's illegal. That's kind of legal. Yeah, we can kind of do it. That'd be a pain. So being able to sort of manage or balance both of those interests, and I've got here, if it's not at least a B grade for both, it's going to be crazy bumpy. Now, one point and a concept, and I say this with love too, that I want everybody to think about is, in particular for community foundations or any other charities that have endowments, how long is an endowment? What is the time horizon for an endowment? You know what that is. You think, I say this with love, it's perpetuity. It's a fun word to say. Perpetuity, perpetual, perpetuity. Super fun. What does that actually mean? So I want you to think about this for a moment. What it means is when you take in a fund that is a permanent endowed fund, which is what 99% of all community foundations want, a permanently endowed fund, you will manage that fund subject to the fund agreement and those restrictions until the end of time as we know it, and no member of our species inhabits our planet. That's a long time. I legally do not know if we're all on Mars. Who knows if that's coming? Does that continue to maintain the restrictions? No clue. That could be interesting to think about, but you get the point. So when you're talking about managing endowment funds, you can see here, once you swallow an endowed fund, it is in your gullet forever. So be very, very, I'll add another very, very careful what you swallow. You cannot throw it up. You cannot transfer it away. These are permanently restricted endowed funds. So what you agree to today is what the future 137 U's will be dealing with, unless we've blown ourselves up by then, which we probably will, but the future people. And so you can see here, every board too also asks this question, which I find is interesting. Now, what's the best idea? What's the hot new thing? What's going on with community foundations that we need to adopt? And I have my snarky answer is, A, even if I knew what that was, which I do not, you don't have the capacity, resources at all to even implement it if I told you. I don't even know what it is, but it doesn't even matter. Do you know what the best idea is? The best idea is to take 20 to 33%, probably closer to a third, of all the stuff you're doing now and stop it, hack it away. And whenever I mention that to a board, it's always funny to me. Like if it's at a board retreat, the board members will go, oh, let's maybe we need to put a task force. Everybody loves task forces. Oh my God, stop with the task forces. Oh, we need to do a task force and we'll interview staff and we'll do this very methodical, data-driven way of deciding. We're like, no, 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 everybody calm down. I said, we've got 3 or 4 senior staff in the room right now. I said, I don't need to know any details. I said, do you guys know what the quarter to a third of the stuff you're doing now that you would hack away? And every single time, like, we know exactly. This isn't stealth. This isn't like 7 knocks and a secret code you got to figure out. Every senior staff person's like, why are we doing this? Oh my God. And if you do something like that you don't really want to do, this is so important. Many people think by saying yes, that's a good thing. By saying yes, you're maybe creating your own self-inflicted issue because you always do, and I'm yelling here, but I don't care, you always do a good job. Stop doing that. You're adding poison to the well. Do not do that. Going back up here to this Bees Get Degrees A plus customized solution. I haven't had this exact thing, but I've had something pretty close. I'm in Rotary and all my buddies like music. I like music. And what do you know? We all went to the same high school. So we'd like to create a, or let me say this, can kills you. Can kills community foundations. Can we set up a scholarship fund for a blue-eyed clarinet player that graduates from this high school? And great news, we meet every Tuesday at lunch for Kiwanis or Rotary or whatever, and we can all bring in cash of $50. Some will bring in checks. And I'm going to do a pass the hat. And every Tuesday after Kiwanis, I'm going to bring in this little passed hat full of cash and checks to you to add to our blue-eyed clarinet scholarship fund. And by the way, a third of the people would like to have tax acknowledgement letters. Can you do that? Painfully, it's probably legal to do that. But God, no, do not do that. And oh, I guess we will because I'm being bad here. Oh, we're trying to get to all of the small business owners and real estate owners who are in Kiwanis. So this is a way that we can get our name out there because they don't know who we are. We'll develop a brand and they'll realize that we hate doing the scholarship fund and we're going to create all kind of new, huge other funds, endowed and non-endowed, because they're getting ready to sell their business or sell real estate. They're going to think of us. No, they won't. They're going to think you're the weird group that does strange, different colored eyes musical instrument player scholarship funds. That's what they're going to think of you as. And then the person there that's at Rotary is going to get mad at Rotary for some reason because he hates Bob and Bob hates him. So he's going to go over to Kiwanis. And he's over in Kiwanis talking about this great program they would have with Rotary, but they don't like the clarinets at Kiwanis. They like tubas. And here you go. And then you're going to wake up 22 years later, you're going to have 18 musical different-eyed scholarship funds. That's less a joke than you think. That's the issue. And it's because you do a good job. Well, yeah, I guess we can do it. Yeah, I guess we can. I guess we can do all this. And now here you go. And good news, they're endowed, which means they will last until the end of time as we know it, and no member of our human species inhabits our planet. Ta-da! Be real careful about what you swallow. Be real careful about what you say yes to, because those types of funds will breed like crazy. And then they will crowd out everything else. I see it every single time. Yay. So what are the direct and indirect benefits of saying no? Just talked about it. All your resources can be freed up for higher priority activities, however you define that for what your community needs now and for what your community needs in the future. But if you're not preparing for that now, it will crowd out all of those resources in the future because you can't expel easily these kinds of funds. It's obviously the opportunity cost. Stewardship and management flexibility for future staff. I worked at a community foundation. I took in a bunch of these funds, and I know that there is some kind of voodoo doll of me with nails and pins in it. I know it. I get it. I shouldn't have done it. And that's why I'm doing this webinar today, to help you sort of hopefully miss these landmines and that they don't have a voodoo doll of you too. But in all seriousness, this becomes, and I'm being very honest, this is your staff legacy. What do you think about that poor donor relations officer or business officer in the year 2039 dealing with 14 different colored eyed musical scholarship funds? They're going, who set this up? Are they trying to kill us? You get the point. Huge nugget. Huge nugget. And people are like, well, I don't know. It's all so mushy and I'm not sure what it is. Because it is mushy. I get it. I've been there. But here's the nugget. Here is the filter you use. Do you want to do what you're thinking about doing 1,000 times? And if you don't want to do it 1,000 times, don't do it once. It's as simple as that. And if you think, oh, we're going to do this clarinet scholarship fund because, again, we're trying to then somehow through osmosis pivot them over into more of our sweet spot funds, that'll never happen, by the way, ever, ever, ever. And then you're trying to justify it in that way. My sort of joke is I don't drink, but if you give me a beer or give me milk or anything else in 10 minutes, I can justify any community foundation donation, fund, or grant. Anything. Give me 10 minutes, I can justify it. The point is, you could say, well, yeah, we definitely don't want to do this 1,000 times. Hard stop, full stop, don't do it once. And obviously, the efficient stewardship of donors' intent. Many donors are thinking about the times as they are now. That's reasonable, rational, and logical. But they're not thinking about what issues will be 10, 15, 50, 500 years from now. So trying to be able to say, how can we actually steward what the donor is trying to accomplish? And also, we haven't talked about the financial sustainability of this in terms of these types of decisions, less lost leaders. And so if you ever want to have fun, you do activity-based costing for a community foundation. You will convulse on the ground. Whatever, I tell every one of my clients this, you write down what you think it costs you to process one donation check, to process one grant check, to carry one scholarship fund internally managed, to carry one donor advised fund, as an example, and you write that on a little napkin. You write down each one of those things. Oh, I think it's about this. Oh, I think it's about that. I'm not kidding you. You write it down, and then you just multiply all of those things times 3. And that's going to be real close to the right number. That's not a joke. I actually did a 2-hour session on cost accounting for community foundations at a conference. It is as painful as that sounds, by the way. But I named the session, Are We Selling $5 Hamburgers for $3? And then I had to do another 2-hour session. By my math, that's 4 hours of activities-based costing. Joy, joy, joy. And the second session was called, And Do You Want Fries with That? That's what many, many, many community foundations are doing by taking in a lot of these smaller type funds or highly difficult to manage or administer funds, and they're not seeing or realizing what the true costs are, which then have to be subsidized, you see, by other resources, annual campaigns, charging more on larger funds. You have to have a subsidizor if you have a subsidized E. That's how math works. And as I put in there, by the way, great news, it's forever until the end of time as we know it. There'll be a lost leader. So again, be very careful about what you swallow. And finally, again, reducing the administrative complexity and exceptions. Most community foundations are an amalgam of exceptions to exceptions to exceptions, and that works horribly over time. It is kryptonite to community foundations with all of these crazy exceptions that somebody at some point agreed to. And there might have been very easy ways to justify it. Back to my a beer in 10 minutes, I can justify anything. But the point is that that never plays out well over time, ever. So be very, very careful about what you swallow, the exceptions, and obviously the opportunity cost as it's crowding out other activity. So how do you say no? 5 ways of saying no strategically. First, you have to figure out what of the 25 to 30%-ish, hopefully that's all it is, by the way, of things you're like, we don't want to do these things 1,000 times. It would kind of be good to A, be able to sort of get rid of these if we can of the existing portfolio, what's in our stomach if we can, or B, how do we slow down / stop new things coming in because we don't want to get to 1,000 of these. And you do this through fee increase. You can do it by fee. So that creates obviously a disincentive. What kind of fees? You can do it directly by saying, whatever our fee was yesterday, we're charging 10 times that today. So you basically just do a direct fee, or you do a sort of minimum fee each year on a particular type of activity or fund. Or you do sort of indirectly saying, oh no, we're going to charge the same fees, but now you have to have a higher minimum fund size. So different foundations can do different things based on what the activity is, but fee increase tends to be one of the sort of, we'll say the largest knobs or the largest levers, being able to say no. And then you can go straight to policy. We have a policy where we're not doing things in this way, or we're able to optimize against structure efficiencies based on that policy. So maybe we'll have a policy to say, you know what, we're not going to do scholarship funds with separate applications and separate processes for all these individual ones. We're just going to do one master scholarship fund application process. So basically, any of the funds that we're working with have to fit within this master or omnibus type application. So those could be various types of policy changes as well. There are a lot of others, obviously. Or you refer away or internally to a better fit. So you can refer away externally to some other group that is their sweet spot doing those things. Or maybe there's like, hey, this isn't an A+ solution for you, but I know you want to do a blue-eyed clarinet scholarship. What do you know? We have a music scholarship internally. Or maybe there's a field of interest fund for arts organizations or music organizations, as an example. So maybe a field of interest fund might be a better fit for you. I know it's not exactly what you wanted, the A+ fit, but this is something maybe that could be a B solution for you. It'd be like a B solution for us. Now we're both smiling at the end of this conversation and creating the fund. Clearly optimizing structure or efficiencies. We used to do, 4 cycles a year. Now we're doing 1 cycle a year. We're not, we're increasing the minimum grant requirement, for this to make these more efficient, as an example, to try to lower, in particular, the human drivers. Most community foundations expenses are 90% staff. So the only way that you can actually cut expenses is by reducing staff loads. That's it. Nothing else there, not tricky. So being able to reduce the cost drivers, which is the human element of these, going from 4 cycles to 1 cycle, you just reduced it by 75%. Done. So some things can be done easily that way. Obviously, others cannot. But that's sort of the thinking of how do we try to make this more optimal. And then again, adjusting expectation by raising standards or increasing flexibility as well. Being able to have flexibility in these types of funds to say, yeah, we might be able to do this for a little bit, but if the entire board votes, or can we have some other way of saying, if this isn't working anymore, that we're then able to sort of shift this into something more internally, in essence, like building a variance power into these fund agreements without actually having to execute full cypre or variance power at the board level, as an example. So building in, again, some of that flexibility. And most importantly, using teachable moment opportunities to say, I really understand, donor, what you're trying to accomplish. I see the picture, but within what we are doing, here's sort of the 2 or 3 value meal options that might work best. And maybe here's another much more higher priority type of fund, kind of like going from scholarship perhaps to a field of interest fund, as an example, that maybe you were even unaware of. So you're able to use this as teachable moment opportunities, even for unrestricted discretionary funds as well. So we're going to just jump into it. Here we go. There are 8 ways, or at least 8 specific instances. Many of you I know on the phone are going, whoa, whoa, we love number 8. We love scholarship funds, or we love giving circles. Totally fine. But when I work with community foundations, these 8 tend to be the things to say, this is what the 25 to 33% of activities that we're currently spending staff time on. By the way, it might be 20% of our staff time for 1% of your assets. You all see that every single day. And so how do we maybe want to realign or rebalance that? The only way that you can do that, if these are your 8 things, are being able to either make them more efficient internally, refer them away to the extent that you can, or swallow them on your terms. Because you may want to do these funds, but to say, look, if we do these, for us to want to do 1,000 of them, they need to look like this. And if they look like that, then you're happy doing 1,000. Have at it. That works. So it really gets back to this simple, if you do it once, you better want to do it 1,000 times. You don't want to do it 1,000 times, do not do it once. So my whole point here is, some of you love these funds, some of you don't want to do more of these funds. I'm not saying you hate them, but you also maybe see these types of activities as saying, is this the highest and best use of our crazy scarce resources of staff, trying to serve a very complex community that is very broad? And is this where we want to be spending our time? If you say yes, then just skip over this and go get a coffee or anything else. If you say, wait a minute, how do we say no with love with these types of funds or activities? So here we go, memorial funds. So I actually had a poll that I was going to launch, but I'm just going to ask you, after 6 months of every memorial fund, exactly how much is in that fund? So I want you all to think about that. I'm not going to launch the poll because it was a pain in the butt, but think about how much is in every single memorial fund after 6 months. And the answer is $436.14. Every single time. Every single time. Now, you might think I'm the devil. That's okay. I don't mind. So how do you say no to a memorial fund? I took those calls, and those are the most painful calls. And that's why I have this as number one, because if you can say no with love to a memorial fund, you can say no to anything. So we're starting at the deep end of the pool right out of the gate. I would get the call. You get the calls. Joe, I'm so sorry about your loss. Why is Joe calling you? Because he's just lost his spouse or a loved one, and they're trying to figure out what to put in the obituary at the end for memorial gifts, gifts in honor of that person that they have just loved, that probably they lost very, very recently for obvious reasons. And so, what would we do at the community foundation? We would say, we understand, we want to help however we can. So here is our legal name that you can include to receive memorial gifts in the obituary. And exactly how much will we have after every 6 months, every single time? $436.14. How many of these will we do every year? 15 to 20. 15 to 20. And this gets worse. Of the 15 to 20, minimum 5 to 10, usually 5 to 7. 5 to 7 were referred in by the number, we'll just say a top 3 estate attorney in Atlanta. Top 3. And he never referred in, I shouldn't say never, rarely referred in any other funds, because we did a memorial fund with him like 10 years prior to me being there. And he's like, oh, you guys are great with memorial funds. Anytime I ever hear about a memorial fund, I refer them over to you. I hope that's good. Would say, oh yeah, that's great. That's great. We're going, oh my God, no, stop referring in these memorial funds. So he'd refer in the memorial fund. So this, we'll just say this particular one came from his attorney. He told me to call. I don't know what's going on. I'm overwhelmed. Totally understand. So we'd create the memorial fund. 6 months later, $436. Literally, literally what I would do with my donor relations staff is I would have 4 straws. One would be a short straw. This is not a joke. And I would walk out and they'd be going, oh God, no. Oh God, no. I'm like, yep, it's Memorial Fund Day, because after 6 months, no more checks are coming in. And what do we have to do with the fund? We have to close it down because it's nowhere close to our minimum fund size. And our minimum fee at that point was $500 a year. So the whole thing would just be a minimum fund fee. That would go over real well, right? You just fee it to death. That'd be horrible. Also, what have we done to get the $436? We've received probably 25 to 40 checks, all clumpy, bumpy over time. What does the surviving spouse or the surviving loved one want? Totally understandable. Weekly, would you mind sending over to me a list of all the people that have made donations with their names and their contact information and the amount of this? I'm sounding like I'm the devil. Again, I know. So we would do that, and we would do all these reports for 6 months, and they would do all this stuff. And then the donor relations officer who drew that short straw would go out and meet with Joe, and then would have the conversation about, what did Mary love? What did she love doing? Oh, she loved to garden. Oh, okay, so she loved to garden. Absolutely. So maybe here are 2 or 3 ideas about how we can send the whole $436.14, maybe to the Atlanta Botanical Garden, as an example. And Joe would say almost every time, oh my gosh, that's perfect. Oh, what a great gift. That's exactly where that should go. Great. Does everybody see what's just happened? We have spent our time, I sound like I'm bad. You're going to see how this ends up in a second. Creating the fund, putting everything into our CRM system, receiving all the checks. By the way, it costs between $10 and $12 to process every single check. $10 and $12 for every single check. That's the internal cost for every single community foundation. We process all of those checks. Now we're not even talking about doing all the reports. I'm just throwing that, as sunk cost. Then we get to the point that we're now closing the fund down, which is a whole other set of processes, staff time going out, meeting with them, doing it. Why are we doing that? So what I ended up doing was, and I probably stole it from somebody else, by the way, as I said, look, when Joe called now, right out of the gate, I would say, Joe, I'm so, so sorry for your loss. What did Mary love? What were her passions? Oh, she loved to garden. Great. Give me 30 minutes. I'm going to make a number of phone calls, and I'm going to come back to you with 2 or 3 alternative solutions that would best honor her memory. And I might call back with maybe Atlanta Botanical Garden. I'll call over there, get the contact name, get their legal name, get their EIN, get all this stuff, because that's what he wants to be able to put in the obituary. This might be number 18 of all of his tasks to do for all of this horrible, horrible process of losing somebody that you've loved. You're totally overwhelmed. And I said, Joe, you push that on us. We will handle that. We exist to make the charitable funds have the maximum impact in our community to be what your wishes and what her wishes otherwise would be. So then I make that call. I call back Joe. I say, Joe, if this doesn't feel right, you let me know. But I called over at the Atlanta Botanical Garden. They said they're more than happy to help create the memorial fund in her name. If X amount comes in, they have her name listed on the website. If 3X the amount comes in, they'll put a bench in her honor in the Rose Garden. If $50,000 by some miracle is donated, they'll put a bust of her in the Rose Garden. I don't know, but they would be handling it on their end. All the money would be going to them, and that's where it's going to end up anyway after 6 months. So why are we jamming ourselves in the middle of that, holding our nose and biting our lip through that entire process that truncated on the front end? And then every single time we did that, every single time they came back, they said, oh my gosh, that's exactly the right place. Thank you so much. I'm overwhelmed. I know. Don't worry about it. You call us for anything. Here's their legal name. Here's exactly the contact, and you can put that in the obituary. If we call back after 30 minutes and that's not a good fit, we understand. How best can we find a better fit? I'll spend 2 or 3 hours on it because we're going to sink probably at least 40 or 50 hours of combined staff time running it through the entire gauntlet all the way through it anyway. We'll do that all day long. What's also super important, big nugget number 2, in this particular case, the estate attorney sort of heard about this and said, oh, I understand you guys maybe are not doing memorial funds. Like, no, no, no. You call us on anything. We will get that money to the right place. But more and more, we are not the best fit for memorial funds, all things being equal. And if there's a better fit, we're going to find that for you and your clients. 2 things occur right there. 1, huge nugget, huge nugget. Too many community foundations and other nonprofits think that when they're getting a referral from a professional advisor, they have to say yes, 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 yes. Want to build trust? Yes, yes, yes. You know how you destroy trust? You say yes too much. Stop saying yes. I'm a professional advisor, work with a professional advisor for 30 years. When they call you, and they call you 3 times on 3 different cases, and by some miracle, all 3 of those cases are a perfect fit for the community foundation, you have lost all trust. You've lost it because now they don't think you're an objective, unbiased planning partner. This is the strangest thing, paradoxical, I get it, counterintuitive, I get it. The best way to build trust is to say no. We're not a good fit for this one. Here's why. We will find the best fit. That's on us. We'll give you 2 or 3 alternatives. Let us, teachable moment, tell you where our real sweet spot is. We're working with donors who look like this, with these kinds of assets that want to do these kinds of things. That is our sweet spot. But you call us on anything that's outside that sweet spot, we're going to get it to the best place possible. I just want to be careful to let you know and to set expectations that that may not be us. That is music to their ears because now they trust that you're going to find the best fit and solution for their clients. Professional advisors are not puppies. I'm not suggesting they're puppies, but what's the best way to catch a puppy? Puppy's loose, got to catch the puppy. What do? Oh, we run after the puppy. No, 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 no. You do not run after the puppy. You run after the puppy runs away. you run away from the puppy. The puppy will always chase you. Very similar. That is a huge nugget. I spent a lot of time on this number one. I'm going to go quicker through the rest. But if you can say no in a painful life experience with one of your best donors to a memorial fund, that at the end of saying no, they love you more, that you build trust in the donor, you're getting the money to the right place anyway. You're saving your own staff time for other higher and better uses, and you're deepening a relationship with a professional advisor, all by saying no. So I hope you see the power in saying no is much better for everybody in saying yes. You say yes to this fund with $436, the donor's going to feel so bad that they're having to close the fund down. You're spending all of your internal time doing that. The attorney keeps referring to you more, going, oh, you're the memorial fund people. Good, 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 good. No, we were doing that because we somehow thought you were going to figure out we didn't want to have a ton of memorial funds. We wanted these kind of sweet spot funds. And I literally had this estate attorney say, I am so sorry for referring to these. I'm like, what are you saying sorry for? We were too chicken to bring it up. This is our sweet spot. We thought somehow, some way, you would just wake up in the morning and figure out we don't really like memorial funds. That's not on you. That's on me. I'm too chicken. But here's where we fit best. Here's our sweet spot. But call us on anything. So I hope all that's helpful. You may love memorial funds. You may want to do tons of them. Have at it. Then say yes to all of them. But this is if you want to be able to say no, a different way of doing that. Short-term pass-through funds. This comes up a ton, 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 ton. What are short-term pass-through funds? They all come in, they all go out. I was in Atlanta. Not a joke. These are all my scarring. This scars. Would have a donor, one of our biggest donors, very high net worth person. Every year, he had a fund, non-endowed donor advised fund. He'd kept the minimum in there. And then every December, it wasn't the 31st, it was like the 5th or the 6th, so he wasn't too crazy. He would send $100,000 of Coke stock every single year, Coca-Cola stock every single year in early December. We would process the stock, do the acknowledgement, get the fund put into his account, all the stuff that you know you do every single day. And then every single year, the following January, mid-January, so like 30 days later-ish, he would send us, I do not know why, a handwritten, itemized grant recommendation sheet. Wait for it, to 100 charities. I have no idea why it had to be 100 for $1,000 each, so that at the end of every January, we had zero. And why did we do this for like 15 years? Because we knew he had a lot of capacity, and somehow through osmosis, we thought he would figure out that we hated doing this short-term pass-through fund, and that he would figure that out somehow. Did he figure it out? No. What did he do? He told all of his golf and club friends that, quote unquote, the community foundation is great. They make it so easy. I used to have to do all these different DTC stock transactions to like 40 or 50 charities. I couldn't handle it anymore. They do it once, and now I'm able to give even more charities because they do everything. They are great. You just give them the money and they grant it all out super, super fast. And we ended up, not a joke, with about 15 to 20 of these funds every single year doing the same thing. If you do something once, you better want to do it 1,000 times. We attacked this with a fee. So we said, okay, tell you what, it's going to be 3% or $3,000, whatever is greater. A number of the funds going, oh, that's too high of a fee. We're like, no, we totally understand. Here's our sweet spot. Here's what you might be able to do. 2 or 3 of them, not all of them, put a large new donation in to keep a larger balance in their fund. And they weren't doing 100 of them like he was. They were doing like 4 or 5. But you get the point, like, oh, okay, we'll just do that. We also had another one. This was actually a private foundation. They'd run $1.4 million through us every year. It would sit in the fund like 15, 20 days and then would go out. We'd get no fee on that. We'd get basically the float for 15 days. Huge pain, huge. We came back to them. We'd done it forever. We were so chicken, like, oh my God, they're going to hate us. Da, da, da. We came back and we said, you know what? We're trying to sort of slow these types of activities down. Here's where our sweet spot is. Here's where we're trying to sort of focus more of our time. but we are now at 3% or $3,000, whichever is greater. They looked at us and said, yeah, we had no idea how you were doing this all those years for that. 3%, they said, is totally reasonable. We're like, oh my God. We were both happy coming out of that meeting and upset coming out of that meeting going, we've been doing this for like 15 years with this group. And can anybody do the math on 3% on 1.4 million? It's $42,000 a year we just got now as an additional administrative fee to be able to do, in essence, subsidize other more important to us work for the community foundation. Using a policy. Okay, we can run this through, but 2%, 5%, 10% has to stay for discretionary, basically a toll of going through. So maybe it's not a fee or a combination of a fee and a policy. Referring to another provider. Some of these were very small. They were coming in. They're like, oh, we want to have access to this. We want to be able to give much smaller grants. That's another thing. We want to be able to give $100 grants. Like, whoa, that's just going to be so tough. By the way, it costs most community foundations $25 to $30 to process one grant check, $10 to $12 to process a contribution check, $25 to $30 to process one grant check. So we're not, basically 30% is what our fee would be on a $100 gift. Like, oh my God, that's not going to be good. How about a national donor advised fund? They're really good at efficiencies in processing these checks. Or maybe there's another fiscal agent that otherwise would be a better fit. Those groups may want to have 1,000 of those types of funds. I'm not saying you have to say no. I'm just saying if you want to slow these down and to take the 25 to 30% of activity that you're currently using now on these types of funds, there are ways to do that. And then also, again, being able to say, here's what our sweet spot is and our fit. And as I mentioned, 2 or 3 of these funds go, oh, now I see, yes, we'll keep a much larger fund balance in there and do our other type of giving through here, not just this, 15-day year-end giving sort of solution. And they wouldn't know that, right? There's no way they would know that unless we were very clear on communicating to them why that is our sweet spot. Saying no to giving circles. Again, I sound like I'm so bad. Lots of people coming together, fundraising funds all coming together, typically giving small donations into a fund. Many of these are non-endowed. You can have a policy where they're endowed. I get it. But a lot of these are sort of the smaller checks, lots of volume, and then usually a big chunk of the principal, if not all the principal, is then sort of granted out at the end. And so being able to have sort of optimizing structure. So what does that mean? So as an example, kind of like the Memorial Fund, where we're taking sort of all of this sort of internal administration and processing, which most community foundations are not really good at, bluntly. You just don't have volume and scale to be able to do it. In this case, what we started to do with giving circles, we said, you know what, how about we do this? Rather than us sort of having people pledging $500 or $1,000, we're collecting all this from 100 different people, then they do 2 or 3 site visits and they give away most or all of it at the end. It's like, well, why don't we do this? Don't pledge anything. Don't give anything. You can pledge it, but don't give it. As just a suggestion, there might be 50 people that want to do something around environmental issues in town. Say, look, we're already getting these environmental grant applications through our discretionary process. We have maybe an environmental expert on staff on the program office side, and then maybe he or she can give you 2 or 3 different ideas about what might work well. So you get all of the people still meeting and still doing all the stuff. Hopefully they're doing their own meetings without having that staffed. And then at the end, they just make their $1,000 check or their $500 check directly to the charity or the final grantee that they're going to make anyway. It's just like the Memorial Fund. It's like, do we want to do all the sausage making between point A and point B, where it's almost like, I would almost say presumptively annoying and kind of elitist, to tell you the truth, that many are inserting themselves into that process to do all the processing to then make the grant at the end anyway, and whining the whole way through and losing money the whole way through. It's like, oh, don't do that. I'm not saying this is perfect, but I'm saying there are different ways of reorganizing where the payment goes and when it goes, and you achieve exactly the same thing by them giving the $500 individually to the environmental organization that they choose as the final grantee versus giving all that to the community foundation first, and then the foundation ends up giving all that money over to that final grantee. Same thing with a fee. I talked about per check, higher annual fee, especially if it's a pass-through fund. Again, there's no endowed component, or if it's a very small endowed component. And then expectation setting. It could be like, look, we love you guys, raise all the money, but we're not going to make any grants until the fund raises, some X size. Or back to staff time, we love you, but until the fund, reaches X size or there's some kind of fee component to this, we can't have, 10% of our staff time actually, organizing, manning, the meetings. And I was like, oh, no, we'll do it as volunteers. You all know how that ends up. There's always one great volunteer for 3 years, and then they always move. So, and then there you go. And then now you're the ones doing it because you sort of started the whole concept. Anyway, the rest of that story. And then this is very, very important too. Maybe a third nugget. I think I never heard any community foundation that I've ever worked with say to me, Brian, we had the best year ever last year through all of our giving circle and fundraising fund conversions in terms of, oh, we're going to do this giving circle because we'll be able to pluck out the high net worth people to create larger funds out of that. I definitely have heard about that, like 1 out of every 1,000 giving circle donors, to be blunt. And I've never, ever had anybody say, if we could just launch 2 or 3 more giving circles or fundraising funds next year, they're just nothing but gold mines. That would put us over our contribution or donation goals for the year. Never had anybody say that. There's always the expectation, again, justification, that if we do this with lots and lots of different people, then all these estate gifts are going to come out of it and all these big gifts. In most cases, you don't have time to cultivate and steward those donors enough because you're always planning the next meeting and processing 900 checks. I'll be blunt, than to ever be able to tickle and move management, those people up through the chain anyway, because you're so overwhelmed with managing the fund itself. That is 100% more true than not. So that's the reality check. Saying no to agency endowments. So expectation setting. Is this a permanent endowment or not? If it is a permanent endowment, maybe the community foundation might not be the best fit because they always like permanent endowments when they're under $1 million and no bank or other financial institution wants to talk to them because it's below their minimum to make any money. And I will tell you from experience, the deepest scarring I have ever received are those agency endowment funds that have grown the most. Counterintuitive. You tell me a $3 million permanently endowed agency endowment fund, and I will tell you within 5 years, you're going to have some investment committee member on that board beyond jawboning and saber rattling going, okay, we're big now. We want the fund back. I love you. You're not getting the fund back. This was a permanent endowed fund. What idiot would have ever created a permanent endowed fund? We can do it at half the cost now that we're at 3 million. We can have people flying in from New York with cookies and candy and bouquets of flowers because they all want our business now for all the larger financial services companies. And we'll say, I appreciate that, but this was a permanent, irrevocable endowment fund. Basically, your past boards trying to keep your hands out of the cookie jar, and no one else wanted to be able to manage your fund when it was low. Now that it's large and it actually is profitable, now you want to be able to take that away. That we can't do that. I literally would have to meet quarterly with one charity, quarterly, and tell them every quarter what the performance was, what the fees were, and why they couldn't get the money back. Every single, you want to talk about passive aggressive? I mean, it's over the top. And our fees were double what any other ones were because we subsidized it for 25 years to get it up to the point that it's $3 million. The point is, be very careful. They love you when it's small. The second it hits 7 digits, it's $1 million at night on a Wednesday at 2 a.m. All of a sudden, everything changes because the person who set up the fund was 18 board chairs ago. And now you got the person super upset. Attacking with fees, potentially higher annual fee or minimum fund size, or referring to another provider. The other idea could be, as I hear all the time, oh, well, we're too small. We don't have an investment committee. It's like, I understand all that. Oh, we definitely want to be able to keep our hands out of the cookie jar. Or if things get a little bit tough, we don't want to raid the endowment. I understand. You can manage that through board resolutions with a majority or supermajority to be able to access principal. And maybe you set up an endowment fund, not a separate EIN, with some financial institution or mutual fund. Just say, just invest in the Ballot Index Fund until it hits $50,000. It's not that complicated. The point is that I'm not giving you investment advice here, but the point is you can solve maybe their problems without taking on a $12,000 agency endowment fund. And then when their new CFO comes on, they call your CFO, this happens every single time, and say, oh, I'm a brand new CFO, no big deal. I've got a finance committee meeting tomorrow. Can you send me the last 7 years of quarterly statements? I'm like, oh my God, that happens all the time. So the point is you can still have this simple and allow them to achieve their goals of through board resolution and through investment management. That's not too difficult. And then also, I always say this too, when I work with foundations, they'll say, oh, we're your outsourced plan giving officer. We're your outsourced plan giving provider. And I'm like, shut up. If they are smart, they'd be like, whoa, whoa, I can create a $12,000 fund over there and you're my plan giving officer? Oh, yes, yes. Anything you need. Oh, okay. Well, show up at 9 a.m. on Monday morning. I'm going to have meetings scheduled back to back to back all day long, all week long. I'll use that all day. How they don't take advantage of that, I have no idea. But that's what I would do. I'm like, okay, we'll have fun with this. I just got a new staff person by setting up a $12,000 fund. So you get the point. Number 5, saying no to a mission mismatch, being able to refer to another provider. So as an example, if it's a very faith-based donor and they're looking at your grant list or looking at your priorities, maybe it's not going to be a good fit, as you know, maybe a national donor advised fund, or it could be even another community foundation. There's a really interesting case that came up. This was actually with a community foundation in Charleston, South Carolina, a long time ago, and it was during the recession. And they called me and they said, we are having just a huge board issue, huge board issue. Boards like want to kill each other. And I'm like, what? And they said, well, we got a donor that wants to give like $2 million or $3 million into a non-endowed donor advised fund. I'm like, okay. And they said, but he told us right out of the gate, he moved down to Charleston from the Northeast, and basically all of his grant making is going to go to Yale and other Northeastern charities. And he goes, I just want to be upfront. That's what I'm doing. I said, okay. They said half the board said, do not take that fund. They said, we did not create our community foundation to be a glorified fundraiser for Yale. They got plenty of fundraisers. And if the grants aren't coming back to Charleston at all, why are we doing this? The other half of the board is like, what are you talking about? You take the $2 or $3 million, we're in the middle of a recession, you charge 1%, you get 20, 30 grand, sign them up like now. What are we talking about? The point is, I'm almost positive they chose not to take that fund. I love the clarity, but for them, that was a mission mismatch. That is not what their purpose and mission was in that particular case. So many of you sort of go through that as well. How about an asset or vehicle mismatch? Obviously, that's what we do, so I want to be careful here, but maybe a gift annuity. Maybe another community foundation does that, or our national gift annuity foundation does that, or real estate. Any of these other kinds of assets or vehicles may not be a good fit, and you're sort of saying no, but then you're also referring to another place that can potentially be a better fit. So I actually talked yesterday with a community foundation that we worked on a long time ago, where we took the oldest known gas station in New Jersey. They had said no to that, ended up selling for 1.4 million, 1.5 million, all went into their unrestricted fund. But they had to process it through us because they said, we're never taking the oldest known gas station in New Jersey. Or again, a New York gift annuity or other types of things too. Small funds, same type of thing. This fund's coming in, donor's super excited, but it's just going to be small, maybe not likely going to grow over time. What do you do? They can make direct grants, of course, to organizations, to nonprofits, or they may be able to set up some other donor advised fund with a smaller minimum. So, or being able to say, look, we can build it up, kind of the so-called acorn or build a fund. You can do small funds, but it has to build up to some level before we can start making grants. Or with fees too. So we had a minimum fee in Atlanta of $500 a year. Everybody freaks out about that, which is funny to me. Basic cable, look it up. Look it up right now. Basic cable, TV cable, basic is $835 a year on average nationally. That's not a joke. So if what you're doing is less valuable than basic cable, shut your doors. You're providing them a private foundation alternative, all the Pension Protection Act compliance, investments. I mean, oh my gosh, accounting, donor service, I mean, all this stuff, perpetual stewardship. If you're not worth their cable bill, oh, but you can basically have these as larger fees to be able to disincent smaller funds. And surprisingly, a ton of new funds will come in and go, oh, that's the minimum fee? Okay, I'll just start with a larger fund. A lot more than you would think will do that. And then, or a minimum fund size. And finally, sort of on the scholarship fund side, there are a lot of community foundations that love scholarship funds. I'm not picking on scholarship funds. I think the Oregon Community Foundation has maybe 400 scholarship funds, agency endowments, which we just talked about. I think the Oklahoma City Community Foundation has like 300 agency endowment funds, something like that. So some very much, it is their sweet spot. It is a core of what they do. But for those, there are very large community foundations that have less than 10 scholarship funds, what I would call true scholarship funds. You can see they're referring to another provider. Scholarship America just exhibited at the last AdNet conference. This, believe it or not, they do scholarships. You can kind of figure that out on their name. Do a great job, very efficient, have tons of them, have volume and scale to be able to do that well. Or you're saying, we'll do a scholarship fund, but it'll be externally managed. It's a designated fund. It's going to a specific university or school. They're managing the scholarship process. What can go wrong with 18-year-olds trying to fill out applications with deadlines? Kind of a joke, but not really. Versus that's internally managed, where you are doing all of those things. Scholarship funds will look great on paper, as you know, but man, that is a process. So most community foundations don't break even on scholarship funds, not a joke, until they're at $250,000 to $300,000 is the break even on a scholarship fund that's internally managed. It's about $47,000 if it's externally managed, because that's simply, again, a designated fund. And I mentioned sort of one standardized application versus custom processing. Same thing around fee. Some have it at $2,500. Oh my God, that's huge. That's 1% on $250,000. Would you want to do a ton of scholarship funds that way? Maybe yes, maybe no. But you basically calibrate these various ways of saying no and expectation setting to make sure it's at least a B type solution that you would want to do 1,000. And then obviously minimum fund size. And then also, this is more the teachable moment. Like, I know you want to do a scholarship fund, but did you know there are tons of scholarship funds? We have some amazing programs locally that we've identified through our field of interest discretionary process for education. I'm making this up. Did you know that if people aren't sort of at reading level by grade 3, their probability of graduating in 12, by their senior year is incredibly low? Or we have this great mentorship program going from elementary school to middle school, which is a very bumpy time, has incredible results, huge impact. Because if we can use these types of grants to get them college ready and graduate, they can get scholarship funds all day. And in many donors will go, I had no idea. I'm like, right, that's why we're the community foundation. We know what's working locally. So yeah, I don't want to do a scholarship fund. I think this would be much more impactful to do a field of interest fund as an example. That's a teachable moment opportunity. So with that, I think I'm maybe 1 minute over, barely. Ta-da. So 1 minute over. I hope this has been helpful. These are all of our past webinar recordings. Obviously, those will be up there. As I mentioned, we got about 55 of these now, again, all free. But most importantly, the big theme here is it's okay to say no, doing it with love. You can see the different ways, the 5 different ways of doing it. And I went through at least 8 of what tend to be the ones that most community foundations don't want 1,000 of. And so this is a way that you can both pare down existing portfolio of work and time, and also sort of keeping some other ones from coming over the transom that you're not able to swallow, because once you swallow it, you've got it forever for endowed perpetual funds. So I wish everybody the best of luck. Again, put anything in the Q&A, I'll be able to scrape that. We'll send this out next week, and thank you so much for your time. Thanks, everybody.